Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Today we want to talk about how to survive World War III. We're not quite there yet, and we may not get there, at least not soon, but there's definitely, we're getting closer. And we'll have to wait and see over the next few days. There's all kinds of stuff being released. I mean, we're all probably aware of it. You know, now there are basically no insurance companies are insuring any flights going in and out of or over Ukraine. Many countries, the last I had seen, about 30 countries have told their citizens to leave, or they have actually pulled people out, even their diplomats. Some of them have pulled their military out. It just keeps going. CBS News this morning was saying that U.S. intelligence says that Putin has given his commanders an order that they are to be ready to go on the 16th, which is Wednesday. Now, I'm still of the flavor that this is probably going to be, we're probably going to see some kind of false flag happen on the American front to give America some the motive that they need, or that the Biden administration wants to go into this. But that's not what today's video is about. We'll talk about that in another video. Today I want to talk about what do you do and some things that you can do now to get yourself prepared for if and when we go into World War III. And this is significant. This is not, most everyone watching this video is old enough to have experienced at least some war that America has been in. But everything since World War II, we have engaged with adversaries that really, in the end, weren't a great threat to us. We were engaging with them, protecting a region from communism or protecting an interest in oil or something. But they, as an opponent, really weren't a great threat to us as Americans. And it wasn't necessarily a large war. They weren't world wars. So what we're faced with, folks, is we're faced with the possibility of standing against two of our largest adversaries, the two adversaries larger than anything America has seen, at least since the War of 1812, that pose a real, true threat to us. Both of these countries have the potential to destroy us. I mean, if we don't handle ourselves correctly. And so what I'm saying is that if we were to get involved in a global war with Russia and China, and it looks just like the Biden administration wants it, he wants it, he can taste it, it's going to be a bad deal. So here are some tips, and this isn't everything, but this can kind of get you started. Number one, remember that commodities are going to be in short supply. Some of this information that I'm giving you is based on what we went through in the last World War, and some of it's based on what we're going through now and trying to figure out, what we might expect out of this. So remember that commodities are going to be in short supply. This may not have been true in the most recent wars that we've been in because, again, they weren't large scale enough that it put a real drain and strain on the American supply chain. But if we get involved into a world war, especially on multiple fronts, and if we got involved with a big war with Russia, we would almost certainly be involved in a war with China also. And so there would be multiple fronts there. It would be very large, most likely, and become a very big strain on our supply chain. So expect to see shortages. We're already seeing shortages, and that's the thing. I want to talk about this a little bit later in the video, but remember, and think of it this way, we are in a much worse position right now potentially going into a world war than we ever were back in the 30s, in the late 30s and early 40s when we went into World War II, and I'll touch on that some more here in a minute. So some of the things that would be in a short supply is ammo, obviously. Most all of your major ammo companies contract with the U.S. government, and they produce certain amounts of ammo or components in ammo, maybe the shell casings or the powder or the bullets or the whole thing. And so ammunition is going to be in short supply. We have seen this just with the recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, where there was a little shortages here and there because of that. And so if we were involved with a global war, we would most certainly see shortages in that. Other would be food shortages. Now, this is some of the stuff that we were short during World War II. During World War II, there were butter shortages, milk shortages, meat, sugar shortages. People were rationing. Some of you may have remember or seen in history, the little ration stamps, kind of like a food stamp, which would allow you to have so much food and then you were cut off. We could very well see that happen again. Could be for some of the same things. We got to feed all those troops, and we have to put forth, the priority is the war effort. So for those of you back home, it could be in very short supply. Emergency food also, emergency food companies. Most of these emergency food companies sometimes also contract with the military or with the government to produce a certain amount of food for them, and they could be pushed into producing the majority of their food for the government in some form or fashion. So that would also could be in short supply. Basic necessities, toilet paper, razors, ink pens. A lot of this stuff was in short supply during World War II because it was being used overseas, and also it was in short supply because a lot of those companies were building and making other things other than the little things that you use here in the States. They were making something else for the war effort. Gasoline and other fuels. This is most definitely going to be the hardest hit. If we go to war with Russia, I believe that they're our third largest supplier of gasoline. We're going to get hit that way. You're going to see prices at the pump skyrocket. You're probably going to see shortages and rationing at the pump and in other fuels. So make sure you're stocked up, and make sure you have alternatives to heat your home and to fuel the things that you need around the home, because that's going to hurt. And then other things, and this is from World War II, things like appliances and stuff were really hard to get during World War II because a lot of those companies refitted their manufacturing to produce other things for the war. And so we would see that kind of stuff happen most likely in a global war. Now, some other things to think of is imports may cease, or at least a lot of imports, especially if China's involved. And again, if we get involved with Russia, you can just almost guarantee that China will be involved also. And we could see imports cease or greatly reduced from that. And we do get a lot of things from China. Number one is medicines. We get a lot of medicines from China, over the counter and prescription. Did you know that since 2004, America has not produced any antibiotics, any whatsoever? Since 2004, almost 20 years. So it's not like we would say, oh, well, we'll just start manufacturing them here. We don't even have the equipment. We don't have the capability. It would take a while for us to get up to speed to actually produce some of these things, because for too long we have pushed the production of these items overseas. And in fact, to the point that there's been Senate hearings and investigations over the last several years of how that's a very critical weakness of our country, that a vast majority of our medications are produced overseas. So you need to stock up on those things. Other stuff that would be imports, parts to just all sorts of stuff. Automotive parts, all kinds of different parts come overseas. And even if they don't come from China, they could certainly be affected due to naval blockades, wars out in between ships and stuff that would impede upon just the import and export of goods. So anything that you would get that's imported could very well become difficult to get. And then also things like medical equipment. For those of you that use medical equipment, try to stock up on stuff as much as you can, because that could be in short supply during a global war. And then always remember this: governments always grow during wartime. They always do. They get bigger. They get more intrusive. They get more powerful. And they almost never relinquish that back after the war is over. And with the state of things are today, I can just about promise you that if we got into a global war, that our government is going to grow, and our government is going to become more intrusive, and our government is going to do things even more so that what we couldn't imagine that they would do, all because we're at war. We have to do that, and it's our patriotic duty to just be okay with it. And so you need to be prepared for that. More surveillance. I mean, there's going to be surveillance. There are a lot of Chinese and Russians in America. And if we went to war with them, we've got to surveil everything because some of these people could be operatives. More mandates. Whether they're health-related mandates or others, there's going to be mandates. There's going to be edicts coming from the White House, from the pen of the president. And we're all going to say, well, that's not a real law, but it's not going to matter because all the people with badges and guns are going to enforce them anyways. And so we need to be prepared for that. Quarantines, very likely, not just health quarantines, but things like what was seen during World War II. Anyone that might be connected, whether ethnically or nationally, or just have some connection with someone that could be deemed an enemy combatant or an enemy of the state, could be quarantined or could be in some kind of lockdown. We could see lockdowns of just any citizen, and it could be done for the good of the nation, for national security. Things like martial law or even things like curfews could very easily happen in a large national or in a large global war. So these are things to get ready. More civil unrest. We always see that during wars. People get upset and they go out in the civil unrest. Well, we're already seeing that now. And so it could just compound and become bigger and greater and more dangerous to you. So that's something to think about. And then, like I said earlier, economic collapse. We are not in the same place that we once were when we went into World War II. In fact, a lot of people say, well, World War II helped us get out of the Great Depression. And there is some truth to that. But the fact is that economically, we were already healing from the Great Depression a year or two before we entered into World War II. We were doing better, okay? We are not doing better economically as a nation. We're doing really bad right now economically as a nation. We're over our head in debt. And we're doing bad. We all know that. And so going into a global war, while it could potentially help that, it could very greatly hurt that. And I think that's possibly where we're going to lean to. A lot of people are saying online, well, it's going to hurt Russia worse than us because they're in just a horrible place economically. I don't want to paint them too rose-colored, but I don't think Russia is in as bad a place as a lot of people think. I mean, just look at some numbers. America has $30 trillion in debt. We have almost 128% debt to GDP ratio. While on the other hand, Russia has only $300 billion in debt, and their debt to GDP ratio is only 12%. That's very low for a nation. In fact, it's one of the lowest in the country, in the world. When we went into World War II, our debt to GDP ratio had dropped down to about 44%. And at the peak where we were incurring so much debt during World War II, our debt to GDP ratio only got to about 119%. So it was lower than what it is now. And that was towards the end of the war when we were just putting everything we had into it. So how much more debt would we go into in a global war? How much worse would it affect our economy? I'm sure a lot. The ambassador to Russia, this was said today, that all these sanctions that America and Biden administration says that they're going to put on Russia if they invade Ukraine, he says, we don't care. It's not going to hurt us. We don't care. We don't care about your sanctions. And he said it in a very explicit way. And I think that there is some truth to that because for years, China and Russia have been kind of setting themselves up as an alternative, an alter economy to what the global standard is of the American economy and the American dollar. In fact, the two countries that own and utilize cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin the most is Russia and China. They're kind of setting themselves up in a position to where if all these sanctions are put on them, they're going to be okay, or at least they think they will. So don't just count on that, well, we would crash the Russian economy and we would stand because we're America. We're not in the place that we once were, folks, and I think it could greatly hurt us. Then there's just other risks if we get involved into this World War III thing. Possible invasion, like I said, this would be the first war probably since the War of 1812 that America actually has a risk of being invaded. I'm not saying that they would. I'm just saying that that's an actual real risk. The risk of Hitler invading America, I mean, it was a long shot. We would have had to, it was unlikely, and certainly not any war since then. But this one would be different. There's also the possibility of nuclear attack. In fact, both Biden and Putin have mentioned that in the past weeks involving this current conflict. And then with a nuclear attack, there's also the potential of an EMP attack. And remember this, as much as people say, well, you know, we would never do that, they would never do that, and maybe there's some truth to that, but if there's a global war, there's someone out there that's going to be the wild card, and that's North Korea, and they're involved, and they're going to be siding, of course, with Russia and China. And I personally think that they would be the one possibility that could use nuclear weapons in a global war, because they want to be noticed and they want to be a big part of it, and they want the world to fear them too, like they would be fearing Russia and China. And so don't discount that we would not see nuclear weapons in the new coming World War III. So folks, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying it's becoming daily much more likely to happen. And I don't think it's necessarily because Russia is the aggressor in all this. I'm still not really convinced what Russia would have any interest in invading Ukraine based on what's happening. I think that there's a lot of misinformation, and I think that that America, especially the Biden administration, I think they want this. And I don't think it's going to go well for them, and I don't think it's going to go well for us. So folks, get out there and get ready. According to the news, you may only have just a few days left. And I think that if this does happen, I think it'll move a lot faster than we ever thought was possible. So folks, get your houses in order. Prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you all for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.